What it do, cuckolds? It's your boy the hater, and this is a special request from Dark Star. You know what I'm saying? Dark Star's Torpedoes of Truth. Typically, your name appears as something else, doesn't it? I think it was the real Dark Stars. Don't think I haven't noticed you. The hater knows you're a longtime fan, and I did get emails from you and other people with requests for videos. I've been busy, that's why. Don't worry, they're coming. But he requested this video. And it was to do a analytical, if you will, video about the debate reaction. He said, make it neutral, not political. That's what I'm here for, cucks. Nobody knows where the hater leans politically. I would say center right, you know what I'm saying? A little bit in the center, more right than left for sure. But we're going to do our best to look at the debate highlights. Now, I watched the entire debate, and quite frankly, I thought it was very boring. You know what I mean? Trump, who typically is, of course, very charismatic and entertaining, wasn't his usual bombastic self, which I thought was a good idea. Biden, a lot of people said he shat the bed completely, but personally, I didn't think it was that bad. We're going to see, but I didn't think it was that bad because it seemed to me like it was the same debate as 4 years ago, right? It's not like Biden has gotten much worse these last 4 years. He's always, not always, I should say, because he was actually, a lot of people don't know this, but back in the day, in the 90s and stuff, Biden was sharp as a tack. He was one of the smartest people in politics ever, in my opinion. When he was sharp, he was quick, he was ballsy. That's why Obama chose him, but those days are long gone. Now let's get started. I did think that a lot of people were talking shit and saying that Biden was, he ruined his chances. And it's like, this is the same Biden we've been seeing for at least the last few years. So I don't know why people are saying that, but let's see the highlights.
What I'm going to do is fix the tax system. For example, we have 1,000 trillionaires in America. Billionaires in America. And what's happening? They're in a situation where they, in fact, pay 8.2% in taxes. If they just paid 24%, 25%, either one of those numbers, they'd raise $500 billion, I should say, in a 10-year period. We'd be able to wipe out his debt. We'd be able to help make sure that all those things we need to do, child care, elder care, making sure that we continue to strengthen our healthcare system, making sure that we're able to make every single solitary person eligible for what I've been able to do with the COVID.
All right, so obviously that's an incoherent mess. It wasn't clear at all what he was saying. He stumbled his words. He brought up COVID, unrelated. But the long and short of it basically was let's tax the rich more. Now, personally, I don't think that's a good idea. And quite frankly, not to sound like an anarchist or anything like that, but the reality is that the government should have other ways to generate revenue, right? The fact is that the government doesn't. They're lazy, they're losers, they're a bunch of dorks and goofs, right? They don't know how to run anything. They're not business people, the vast majority of them. So the reality is that the government, the only answer they have to solve problems is to just print more money or to take more money from all of us. You know what I mean? I'll put it to you this way. When the hater was a kid, the sales tax went up from 5% to 6%. One day, me and my friends were like, oh, shit. The water that used to cost $1 and we paid $1.05 with tax? They're like, yeah. I'm like, now it's $1.06. And we're like, oh, okay, whatever, right? The Revolutionary War, motherfucks, was fought partially for far less of a tax increase than that. So the fact that people just accept these things is kind of crazy to your boy, right? And the notion that billionaires are going to accept a 16% tax hike because Biden and the government can't do their jobs. Now, you may be thinking, hater, how can the government make money? Well, the government can do what everyone else does. Work, provide services. You know what I mean? Raise revenue through events, right? So, for example, when a country hosts, let's say, the World Cup, they do a bid, right? They can make this bid contingent on all the revenue going to the state or something like that, right? Everyone wins. That's one example. There's a million things that the government can do. For example, the government can produce weapons, right? Buy them from Lockheed Martin for let's say $100,000 for a cache of weapons and sell it for $300,000 somewhere else. They can do the same thing with anything else, right? They can tax other countries. It's called import and export. I'm not saying let's get rid of taxes, but the solution to the problems is not, take more money from rich people and give it to poor people, right? At the end of the day, it's understandable that rich people are going to be like, no, fuck that. You want to take everything from me? Kiss my ass, right? And not only that, but what Biden said was just incoherent nonsense. You know what I mean? And also the math doesn't add up. He said that it would generate $500 billion of revenue. First he said million, then he corrected it to billion over 10 years. That's $50 billion a year. That's like nothing in the context of the national debt. He was like, that's going to pay for all the debt. No, it's not. It's not going to pay for anything. It's not going to pay for Medicare. It's not going to pay for schools. It's not going to pay for anything, motherfuckers.
Dealing with everything we have to do with, look, if we finally beat Medicare.
Thank you, President Biden.
Just going back to Ukraine for 1 second.
Yeah. I mean, he ended a thought, and the thought was nothing. He doesn't know what the fuck he's saying.
We have an ocean separating us. The European nations together have spent 100 billion, or maybe more than that, less than us. Why doesn't he call them and say, you got to put up your money like I did with NATO? As far as Israel and
facts, that's the truth. The reality is that the war in Ukraine impacts countries like Poland, Germany, France, and even England way more than it impacts us here in the States. But for some reason, America has to foot the bill, right? And what Trump is saying is perfectly reasonable. The EU is a measurable economy to the United States. Furthermore, the EU is comprised of several sovereign nations. So together, they should be able to muster up more money than America to deal with Russia if Russia is in fact this huge threat. Personally, I never understood this even as a child. And the hater is a history buff, motherfuckers. But this idea that Russia is this perpetual enemy of the United States pisses me off because I have nothing against Russia. They've done nothing to us, right? I mean, they've done things to us the same way that we've done things to them, like capture prisoners of war and send spies and things like that. But Russia's never started a war against America. Russia's been our ally in some very important world conflicts. And the reality is that we treat Russia like this redheaded stepchild, and it's not fair. And not only that, but this going on in perpetuity and the provocations towards Russia are what led to the war in Ukraine. The U.S. is largely to blame, but so is NATO and the EU. So what Donald Trump is saying is very valid. They have a bigger onus to pay the bill if they want to fund Ukraine. It's not my responsibility or your responsibility to fund Ukraine fighting a war that they're never going to win against Russia. Cucks.
And Hamas. Israel's the one that wants to go. He said the only one that wants to keep going is Hamas. Actually, Israel is the one, and you should let him go and let him finish the job. He doesn't want to do it. He's become like a Palestinian, but they don't like him because he's a very bad Palestinian. He's a weak one.
That's fucking wild. He just called Joe Biden a Palestinian, and a weak one at that. This was another good point by Trump. The fact is what the fact is, right? I personally don't agree with the war on Gaza. I think it's a horrible situation, but I'm not naive. I understand that the Jews and the Israelis are pissed off because it was an attack on Israelis. And if we're being honest, it was an attack on Jews, right? Anti-Semitism has gone up. The hater loves the Jews. The hater loves the Arabs and the Palestinians as well. But the fact is this: if you're going to run up to a country and kill 1,200 people and kidnap 200 more, killing women and children and elderly people, then I don't want to hear anything about like, oh, stop killing us. No, go fuck yourself. You played your hand, motherfucker. You played your hand, and that's how it goes down. Now, the hater empathizes and sympathizes with the people in Palestine who are innocent, especially the children who aren't even old enough to vote. You know, that's another thing you hear. They're like, oh, the Palestinians voted Hamas in. Half their population is like under the age of 15. Those people don't get to vote. So why are they suffering? Well, this is how war works, unfortunately. So what Trump said, even though it pains me to say it, because if it were up to me, the war would just end, right? And Palestine would be given some sort of autonomy and some sort of land. But since that's not in the cards, what Trump is saying is unfortunately correct. They need to go and finish that quickly so the world can move on, you know, hopefully killing as few people as possible. But that's what happens with war, you know, and this whole idea of like, oh, Palestine is an occupied nation. Yeah, they are. They are. There's no doubt about that, right? The Palestinians have been occupied. Their land has been stolen. But I hate to say it, but I'm going to say it like it is. That's how the world works, motherfucks. You know, it's the same thing when the hater migrated to America. That's when all this hullabaloo was starting about Native Americans wanting their rights. Look, I love me the Native Americans, but the reality is this. Watch the movie Apocalypto. The movie lays it out perfectly. You are a small tribe and a bigger tribe comes along. And then after that, a bigger tribe comes along and eats you. And that's what happened. The strong defeated the weak. And this is not, I'm not saying it's good. I'm not saying that the white European devils, as I'd have you believe, weren't morally justified. But that's what happened, motherfuckers. And here's the thing. One thing that pisses the hater off as an immigrant myself, people say like, well, Europeans are immigrants to the new world. Europeans are immigrants and the natives, it's their land. No, Europeans are not immigrants, motherfuckers. Europeans are conquerors, right? There's a big difference. An immigrant says, please let me stay here. The Europeans didn't come here to the Native Americans and said, please. They said, oh, get the fuck out before I kill all of you, right? Which is exactly what happened, although most of them died of disease. But the same thing's going to happen in Palestine, unfortunately. So if it's going to happen, then to stop the war and stop more wars for starting, it needs to be more swift than it has been. Shame on Israel and shame on everybody else involved, to be honest, for not ending this quicker or whatever, or finding some sort of resolution.
President Biden, you have a minute.
I've never heard so much foolishness. This is a guy who wants to get out of NATO. Are you going to stay in NATO? He's going to pull out of NATO. The idea that we have our strength lies in our alliances as well. It may be a big ocean, but we're ever able to avoid a war in Europe, a major war in Europe? What happens if, in fact, you have Putin continue to go into NATO? We have an Article 5 agreement. Attack on one is attack on all. You want to start the nuclear war he keeps talking about, go ahead. Let Putin go in and control Ukraine and then move on to Poland and other places. See what happens then. He has no idea what the hell he's talking about.
Decent point by Biden there, except the point is also wrong. So Biden's argument here is an argument that you're hearing a lot on the left. The argument is that Putin, once he gets Ukraine, right, then he's not gonna stop there. He's gonna go get Poland. You know, like, this is complete conjecture. There's absolutely no reason to believe this is true. Now, is it possible? Of course. But Putin knows that there comes a point, right? Ukraine was not part of NATO. Now they were invited to be part of NATO, right? And that's also a provocation towards Russia. For those of you that don't know, let the hater educate you. Here's how it works, right? After World War II, the Cold War shortly thereafter happened, right? And the world was split down Berlin, right? On the east side, we had the countries, east of Berlin, that is, the countries that were supposed to be subject to an Eastern Soviet influence, right? On the west, we have the countries that are subject to a Western influence. Now, the West generally had more powerful economies than the East. However, the East also was very powerful. This led to the arms race. This led to a lot of other bullshit that's not relevant here. But what happened fundamentally is when the Soviet Union collapsed, right, there was an agreement. An agreement was placed that we're going to respect this line to a certain degree, right? Where, meaning that America's influence and the West's influence is going to stop at a certain point. And any kind of encroachment beyond that, and vice versa, right, is going to be seen as an act of aggression, right? This happened like when Kennedy eventually stopped what could have been a third world war, when he stopped he also caused, but he also stopped the Cuban Missile Crisis. What happened eventually was that we had this treaty, right? Like, this treaty was signed and or an agreement, and basically America and the West has continuously breached closer and closer to Europe, right? Now, I don't like Putin. And quite frankly, I don't particularly like Russia. I find the Russians to be a bit boring. Sorry to my Russian fans. But the facts are what the facts are. Like, Putin's not going to just pretty much take this fisting, right? So Biden's idea that Putin is like this expansionist is not true. The clearer reality, it might be true, but it's not true based on what Biden said. The clearer reality is that the West keeps encroaching, right? And even like taking Ukraine, which was supposed to be this neutral territory, right, which often aligns with Russia. Culturally, they're very similar. A lot of Russians in Ukraine. The hater fucks with a lot of Ukrainians. The hater knows a lot of Ukrainians, motherfucks. So the idea is exactly that. Now, with all this being said, you know, this nuclear war that needs to be avoided is not going to be avoided by like Trump pulling out of NATO, right? In fact, as Biden just said in the same sentence, NATO has this policy where if you attack one NATO country, you're essentially declaring war against all of them. And there's like 40 or 50 NATO countries. So they don't fuck around. Some of them are powerful, like the US and shit. You know what I'm saying? So in England. But the idea is we don't want to go to war with Russia. We don't want to go to war with China. Right? We don't want to go to war at all. But the warmongering politicians, in this case, mostly the liberals, but the conservatives too. They're a bunch of warmongers, and it's not good at all.
After a jury convicted you of 34 felonies last month, you said if reelected, you would, quote, have every right to go after, unquote, your political opponents. You just talked about members of the select committee on January 6th going to jail. Your main political opponent is standing on stage with you tonight. Can you clarify exactly what it means about you feeling you have every right to go after your political opponents?
Well, I said my retribution is going to be success. We're going to make this country successful again, because right now it's a failing nation. My retribution is going to be success. But when he talks about a convicted felon, his son is a convicted felon at a very high level. His son is convicted, going to be convicted probably numerous other times. Should have been convicted before, but his Justice Department let the statute of limitations lapse on the most important things. But he could be a convicted felon as soon as he gets out of office. Joe could be a convicted felon with all of the things that he's done. He's done horrible things.
The idea that I did anything wrong.
All right. This is more of like a smear campaign. I think anybody that's honest is going to admit that what happened to Trump during this situation is obviously a political move, right? They went after him because they don't want him to be president. I think anybody who is not a outright liar knows that to be true. However, motherfucks, the hater is a man of truth. And the reality is that Trump probably did do the things that he's being accused of, or that he was being accused of, and that he was now convicted of. Now, the fact that it's political doesn't change the fact that the law should still apply to President Trump. Now, should the law then also apply to Biden and Clinton and everybody else? Of course. But in this particular case, you can't just say, well, you know, other people, Bill Clinton slept with an intern and he wasn't like, you know, he paid off other women. Yeah, he should have also maybe been punished. But this doesn't mean that Trump shouldn't be punished because Clinton wasn't punished, right? Just because the law wasn't used on Clinton doesn't mean that the law should also not be used on Trump. Because believe you me, motherfucks, the law would be used on me and you if it was us up there.
Relative to what you're talking about is outrageous. It's simply a lie, number one. Number two, the idea that you have a right to seek retribution against any American just because you're president is wrong. It's simply wrong. No president's ever spoken like that before. No president in our history has spoken like that before. Number three, the crimes that you are still charged with, and think of all the civil penalties you have. How many billions of dollars do you owe in civil penalties?
President Biden, you would be 86 at the end
Biden made a good point there, motherfuckers. Got a lot of civil penalties.
of your second term. How do you address concerns about your capability to handle the toughest job in the world well into your 80s?
Well, first of all, I spent half my career being criticized being the youngest person in politics. I was the second youngest person ever elected to the United States Senate, and now I'm the oldest. This guy's 3 years younger and a lot less competent. I think that just look at the record. Look at what I've done. Look how I've turned around the horrible situation he left me. As I said, 15 million new jobs, 800,000 manufacturing jobs, more investment in America, over billions of dollars.
He's avoiding the question here, but to his credit, it's a bullshit question. Basically, they're saying, hey, man, are you retarded? You might as well just ask him that, hey, are you retarded yet? You know? And like, I don't understand this idea like, oh, well into your 80s, as if 80 is like 300. There's plenty of 80-year-olds that are very, very capable human beings. You know what I mean? How old is Vincent Kennedy McMahon? He's got to be around there, motherfucks. How old is Sylvester Stallone? He's got to be nearing 80. He's 77. And Sylvester Stallone, like, he's going to go for another 20, 30 years easy, motherfuckers. But Clint Eastwood is like 94, and he's been doing movies for the last like 15 years. So this idea that 80 is too old is completely ridiculous. Like Trump is also 80 or almost 80. It doesn't mean anything. Age is obviously, I don't want to say age is nothing but a number, but the reality is that there's people who are 80 that are very, very sharp. Trump is one of them. You know, you can say what you want, but Trump hasn't missed a beat. He's not like slow like Joe Biden is. Joe Biden definitely has some sort of early onset dementia, or maybe he's just tired. It's possible too, like, you know, but he's not all there at this point. You know what I mean? Like, I hate to say it. Like, and I'm not saying, like, I think his intelligence is still there. He's just slower, you know? He just needs time to process these things. And the way that these debates and other engagements work is that there's no time to process these things. So there you have it.
Private investment in enterprises that we are growing.
Former President Trump, to follow up, you would be 82 at the end of your second term. What do you say to voters who have concerns about your capabilities to serve?
Well, I took 2 tests, cognitive tests. I aced them, both of them, as you know. We made it public. He took none. I'd like to see him take one, just one, a real easy one. Like go through the first 5 questions. He couldn't do it. But I took 2 cognitive tests. I took physical exams every year. And, you know, we knock on wood wherever we may have wood. that I'm in very good health. I just won 2 club championships, not even senior, 2 regular club championships. To do that, you have to be quite smart, and you have to be able to hit the ball a long way. And I do it. He doesn't do it. He can't hit a ball 50 yards. He challenged me to a golf match. He can't hit a ball 50 yards. I think I'm in very good shape. I feel that I'm as in good a shape as I was 25, 30 years ago. Actually, I'm probably a little bit lighter, but I'm in as good a shape as I was years ago. I feel very good. I feel the same. But I was willing to take a cognitive test. And you know what? If I didn't do well, I aced him. Dr. Ronnie Jackson, who's a great guy when he was White House doctor. And then I took another one, a similar one.
All right, this is like stupid at this point, but yeah, Trump's obviously cognitively there. I mean, you can say what you want, you can hate him all you want, but he's obviously sharp. You know what I mean? That's the thing that pisses me off. People are like, Trump's an idiot. No, he's not. Trump's very smart. Like, and if you think he's dumb, then there's only 2 possibilities: you're a complete sheep or you're a complete moron. But if you really believe that Trump is not intelligent, like, you're just dumb.
And one of them said they've never seen anybody ace him.
Thank you. President Biden?
You can see he is 6'5" and only 223 pounds or 235 pounds. Well, you said 6'4", 200. Well, anyway, that's it. Anyway, just take a look at what he says he is and take a look at what he is. Look, I'd be happy to have a driving contest with him. I got my handicap, which when I was vice president, down to a 6. But by the way, I told you before, I'm happy to play golf if you carry your own bag. Think you can do it?
That's the biggest lie. He's a 6 handicap of all.
I was an 8 handicap.
Yeah.
8.
Never.
But I have, you know how many?
I've seen you swing. I know you swing.
Okay, let's
not
how
act
many
like
rounds
children.
President Trump, we're going to
21
turn.
Let's not act like children.
Oh, that was great. Okay, coincidentally, I pressed pause, but that's the end of the debate. That last part was a jovial moment. They're kind of fucking around. But I think that Biden kind of took it seriously a little bit there in the end, where he was actually justifying his golf handicap, like as if that's a measurement of your abilities. Who cares if you can hit a ball anyways? We're talking about cognitive abilities here. That's what matters when you're president. Nobody's asking you to go to war. Remember back in the day when presidents would just get on a horse, right? And they'd be like, charge! And then the whole cavalry would like follow them. You know what I mean? Those days are gone. All you only do is play golf and complain. So obviously, if I had to give a grade here, Trump gets a B-. I think he dodged a lot of questions in the real debate, especially ones about childcare, the fentanyl epidemic. He mentioned that a little bit, but not much. His strategy clearly was to just let Biden make an ass out of himself. And I hate to say it, but it worked. Biden gets obviously a score of D- because I can't give it an E or an F because this is what I expected. I don't think anybody expected Biden to come out all of a sudden and be this eloquent like Biden from 1999. No, he's not that dude anymore, right? So we got what we expected. But the reality is what the reality is. Fundamentally, I think at this point, it's like they're saying that Democrats might pick another dude or another woman, I guess, to run. But if it's Biden, I think like if you vote for Biden, there's something like, I don't want to say wrong with you, but it's like you see what you're voting for. You're voting for a guy that can't finish sentences. And it's not, like I said, I don't think he's an idiot. I don't think his intelligence has left him. But it's like, how can you take that guy seriously, right? Like, how can he sit with Putin in a table and negotiate, let's say, right? It's just, he can't do it, Like Biden from the 90s would have been a great candidate. I think he would have been a great president. But this Biden just ain't gonna cut it, And at the end of the day, I think that Trump is going to be the winner personally, but we'll see what happens, And I will say one thing, because I read up about this recently, right? You hear a lot, about like, oh, this president, this country has only been ran by old white men and Obama, right? And let me tell you this. A lot of the people that you think of as old white men, like fucking George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, all these motherfuckers, they were like in their 30s and 40s, motherfucker. So when Thomas Jefferson became president, he was like 35. He was not an old man at all. As a matter of fact, Thomas Jefferson would have beat the shit out of Trump, Obama, fucking Biden, all these guys. These people were thoroughbreds and they were like in their 30s. So when people think like, we have pictures of them when they're older, right? But even George Washington Fucking powdered wig ass Washington was like 44 when he became president. He was not an old man. He was younger than AJ Styles. And guess what? He'd probably beat the shit out of AJ Styles. You know what I'm saying? Because they were built different back then, cucks. With that being said, Hater is going to leave it at this. Hope you guys enjoyed this. I certainly did. So thank you for the recommendation, D. See you later, players.